We are the Safe Elections Network. This is a project of the Election Modernization Coalition, which Janet is going to talk about in a minute. But we're now about 130 organizations statewide who have come together recognizing the challenges that COVID faces to our fall elections. We're organizations from a whole wide range of issue areas, but all with the same commitment of ensuring that folks can participate in elections and stay safe. Janet, do you want to take it off with the EMC? Or you can ask on.
Thanks, Christina. I'm Janet Dominus. I'm the director of MassPIRG, and it's my honor to introduce the Election Modernization Coalition. We are several organizations with different missions, but a central goal in common to make democracy in Massachusetts work for everyone. We came together almost 10 years ago, and since that time have pushed for and won a set of voting reforms, including online registration, early voting, and automatic voter registration. Our top priority for this legislative session had been Election Day registration, and that campaign had a lot of momentum until COVID-19 hit. We quickly pivoted to get the Safe Elections Bill drafted and passed, which most, if not all of you, helped accomplish, and which is the reform we're discussing today. The steering committee of the Election Modernization Coalition is MassPIRG, Common Cause Massachusetts, MassVote, the Mass Voter Table, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, the League of Women Voters Massachusetts, and ACLU of Massachusetts. And of course, all of you are part of the coalition, whether you've been working with us for years or weeks, and we thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet. So also very quickly, we're going to start out by going through an overview of the bill. We're going to stop for Q&A at the end of that. So if you want to hold your questions till that pause, or feel free to put them in the chat. Then after that, we'll talk about the education campaign ahead and all of our next steps, and we'll have a second Q&A after that. So I am happy to introduce Pam Wilmot, my boss and the executive director of Common Cause Massachusetts. Oh no, I think we have a hacker.
What's the matter?
I think we need to kick someone out.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Really great to have so many people on the call. We're currently at 66 people, so that's really fantastic. As Janet said, we pivoted as a coalition to this comprehensive bill because of the impact of COVID-19. And many thanks to many of you who signed on to coalition letters and the like. But you know, this went through a number of iterations, starting with a bill that was introduced by John Lawn and Mike Moran, which we drafted. There was a hearing. It went through the different floor debates, a bunch of different amendments, lots of back and forth, lots of engagement with the Town Clerks Association and with election officials. But long and short, I think that we came out with a very good bill. We're one of a few states that has actually addressed the November election. And we'll have different people go through individual people who will go through the specifics of them. So.
All right. Also, let's see. Next, we have Alex from MassVote to talk about mail ballots.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. You know, thanks in no small part to the hard work of this coalition, voting will be made far more accessible this fall. Over the past week, many of you should have received a vote by mail application. Once the Secretary of State mails out the rest of them by, ideally, tomorrow, all of the state's 4.6 million registered voters should have received an application to vote early by mail. Another mailing will take place around September 14th. The application takes 2 minutes to complete and includes prepaid postage. Beyond this mailing, there are a number of ways that voters can request a ballot to vote by mail. They can print the application online or write to their local election official. Starting on October 1st at the latest, they can also request a ballot to vote by mail through the Secretary of State's online portal. When voters do receive their ballots, they will also include prepaid postage. However, they must make sure to return their ballots with ample time. Primary ballots must be delivered by Election Day, while general election ballots must be received by Election Day.
Can you shut up, please?
Voters can deposit their ballots in secure drop boxes located outside their town or city hall, or deliver them in person. With no shortage of options on how to vote this fall, you should be able to find the avenue that works best for you. Thank you.
All right, quickly, it's clear we have hackers or some Zoom bombers. So I want to just pause and defer to the EMC if everyone's okay with still going forward. I felt like it was better to just acknowledge it than pretend like it's not happening.
Thank you. I mean, I think so far we're managing. If it gets out of control, then I think we might need to close it. But it seems like we're keeping people out and.
Oh, geez.
There we go.
I'm so sorry about this.
I'm trying to block these people as they come into the waiting room, but I'm like not quite fast enough every time. So I'll keep trying to do that though.
Yeah, me too.
We know who it is.
It's a lot of, at least several people. There's been at least 4 or 5.
I think I've made most people in the EMC a co-host. Beth, I will make you one as well. So any help with kicking people out would be awesome. Okay, alrighty. So next we have Rasan to talk about in-person protections and challenges around polling places.
Thank you. So for as much as we stress the priority of being able to vote by mail, there are still several people who will need to be able to cast a ballot in person, which is something that is very important for any number of reasons. And so because of that, in-person voting will still be available. But we still have the reality of dealing with this pandemic. And so this new law requires that the Secretary's office work with the Department of Public Health to develop regulations on how best to provide for a safe in-person voting experience. That includes personal protection equipment for not only the poll workers, but also hand sanitizer, and making sure that there are pins that can either be cleaned or not shared, and that proper social distancing is taking place, as well as any other regulations or procedures that the Department of Public Health deems appropriate for maintaining in-person voting. One of the trade-offs, I think, is because the challenge with trying to identify enough poll workers, they're given the concerns around the pandemic, and also recognizing that the majority of people who have historically served as poll workers are largely people who, because of their age, are more susceptible to the COVID-19 issues connected to COVID-19. And as a result, there's a concern that there'll be a decline in the number of workers. And as a trade-off, municipalities to close a polling location, but that is after a process of taking a municipal level vote, and on the closing, it has to be 20 days before the election, and there must be a report around the impact on historically marginalized or vulnerable populations, so that there should not be any disparate impact on any groups based on race or age or disability status. And that report needs to be made public. But because it is a report, that requires all of us as advocacy organizations, civil rights organizations, civic engagement organizations, to be ever vigilant, to try to find out as much information as possible about where some of the polling locations are that will be closed, and what these reports say going to be in communities that have either historically lower turnout or have higher concentrations of vulnerable populations. For instance, if there is a senior center where there is a polling location, local municipal officials might say it makes more sense to close that one because we don't want to expose our seniors to more people coming in and out of the building. But then that also creates a burden and an impact on those people who normally could just go right downstairs, but now may have to go and get on public transportation. So we want to remain vigilant about that and be prepared to respond to any concerns around closing of polling locations that might have a disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations.
All right, thanks, Rasan. And now I'll pass it back to Nancy to talk about options for in-person voting. I'm sorry, it messed up the order there a little bit. Oh. Nancy, you're muted again.
Nancy, unmute yourself.
There, okay. I wasn't able to do it because it said you had. Anyway,
Sorry.
hello everybody. I am Nancy Brumback. I've been a legislative director for the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts and been working on this bill. This law allows in-person early voting before the state primary for the first time. Previously, there has been no early voting before the primary. And then it also expands the in-person early voting period before the November election. So it has greatly expanded the opportunity to vote in person early to avoid the lines that will occur on election day, especially in November. In-person early voting before the primary is the period August 22nd to 28th. And before the November election, it's October 17th to 30th. And the law requires that there be some weekend hours for that, for early voting, as well as normal business hours at the clerk's office. You can also vote early by mail, and that is available just as soon as the election officials have the ballots available to send out. That's what the application, hopefully all of you are getting, lets you do. If you send your application in right now, it may be a little bit of a delay before you get your ballot because the ballots are still being printed for the primary election. But you could vote early by mail as soon as you get your application in. And then the voter registration deadline, as I'm sure most of you probably know, Massachusetts voter registration deadline is normally 20 days before the election. This law makes it 10 days before the election instead of the usual 20 days. So the voter registration deadline for the September 1st primary is October 22nd. And for the November general election, the voter registration deadline is October 24th. So publicize that people can register online on the Secretary of State's website, or they can download an application and fill it out and send it to their city or town election official, or they can go to their election office and register in person, assuming that the election office is open, which some are not. But it does make it much easier to register. It gives you a much tighter, longer time to register before the election. I'm not saying that right. The cutoff date is sooner, is only 10 days before the election, let me put it that way. So that's a major plus as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. So one quick thing I want to circle back on around issues of elections administration and in-person voting. There are a couple of things that this bill includes that will help ensure our elections are as easy as possible to administer, given all of these changes, and particularly the surge in, well, two things. One, the surge in mail balloting that we're expecting. The bill, in short, allows folks to turn in their mail ballot application either through the mail, in person at their local elections office, or through secure drop boxes. And then it allows elections officials to begin processing those ballots before Election Day, of course, without announcing any results. That wouldn't change. But that just will help ensure that elections officials aren't completely swamped with processing mail ballots on Election Day. Then the second piece, we have, and Rasan touched on this, we've seen in other states shortages of poll workers that of course lead to poll closures and long lines on Election Day. One of the things this bill includes is flexibility in who can become a poll worker. So now you don't actually need to be registered in the municipality where you apply to become a poll worker. And I'll just say that there are a group of organizations and some clerks and a few elected officials who are interested in and organizing around getting more young people to serve as poll workers. So I will, rather than put my email in the chat, I'm gonna just follow up with everyone who I originally emailed, and we'll get the word out about a second conversation that's happening around that. So now we're going to move into just a fairly short Q&A that is going to probably be a little challenging just because of our yeah.
Yeah, people should just put their questions in the chat and don't unmute
Okay.
people, I think.
All right. We were going to also say that people could raise the, yeah, I think the chat's probably easiest.
Just given our challenges, it might be the best thing to do. We already have a question, which is, did Secretary Galvin send out the applications alphabetically by town? So the answer to that is no. The secretary sent out a chunk of ballots. We believe they all should be out by tomorrow. Common Cause, Mass Vote, and 7 individual plaintiffs actually sued the secretary to send out the applications because he held a press conference a week ago saying, well, actually 2 weeks now, saying that he was not intending to send the ballots until he got more money, even though he had $8.2 million from the federal government to do exactly that. So the Lawyers Committee, Lawyers for Civil Rights represented us along with Ropes and Gray, and very quickly the message became quite differently. So Boston applications just went in the mail. I believe there's a couple others. The bilingual applications were the ones that were more delayed, although there was a staggered send out starting, I believe, last Thursday. But we are expecting that they will all be in the mail soon. That's not a ballot, that's the applications. So the ballots are due back by Election Day on the primary. They have to be received by Election Day for the primary, and they can actually be mailed by Election Day on the general and received by the Friday after. So that's a change in our laws.
Let's see. Someone had a question on whether there's a way to request ballots paperlessly. I think I'll start by saying that one of the pieces of the law is that you can send in, this isn't actually paperless, but if you don't have access to a printer, and you can look at a ballot application and on a piece of paper, write out all of the information and send or deliver that. That also counts as an application. The legislation also includes language holding Galvin to at least trying to create an online portal for voters to request a mail ballot. If anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, I just say that it's the online portal has to be done by October 1st, but hopefully it will be done sooner. It will be really good to reduce the paperwork, but I think because these applications went out, that the portal will have less of an impact. But as we get a little established, I think that's how we'll be encouraging people to apply for a ballot. And if you did, there's a question from Carol about if you did opt for all of them, you will get a mail ballot mailed to you for both the primary and the general. And if there are any town elections in between, you get that as well. Usually there are not during this window though.
There's a question for Rasan on whether the bill specifies how the equity analysis for closing poll places is supposed to be done. Rasan, if you want to speak to that. Oh, you're muted.
Okay. It doesn't specifically lay out how that is to be done. It leaves it to the municipalities to make the assessment with the hopes that they don't disenfranchise folks. So in that respect, it's why we need to be extremely vigilant. I think let me look at the specific language. It just says, they shall evaluate and report on whether such change would have a disparate impact on access to polling places on the basis of race, national origin, disability, income, or age, no later than 3 days prior to changing the polling place. So it doesn't lay out how that analysis is supposed to happen. And so, for us at the ACLU, we're trying to project where we think there might be some problems, but there's no way to know which municipality is going to decide to close or change polling locations. So to the extent that anybody has any information or intel, that's very helpful information to share. And then as far as what the evaluation or report looks like, who knows? They could simply say, we looked at the numbers and here's some ideas about who lives over there and who shows up to this polling location, and it's not going to have an impact. And that's a report, but who knows how substantial that is. Our hope is that they will do some due diligence on trying to evaluate that and consult with experts, even if it's pro bono, in making those decisions.
Thanks, Rasan.
So one question I saw was about DocuSign, and no, we cannot use DocuSign with the application. And the ballot also, once you get that, has a affidavit that you have to sign and send back. The online portal will not require a signature. That was one of the things that we fought for in the legislation, so that they'll require some identifying information, but you will not have to sign on the online portal.
Let's see, we have a couple more minutes for Q&A. There was a question on security that we have around mail-in ballots, which I think is also a question about, in some ways, post-election audits in Massachusetts, if someone wants to take that.
Yeah, I can talk about that. I mean, the myth of voter fraud and, no security in vote by mail is an absolute myth. it's a tool used to intimidate and disenfranchise voters. We don't always agree with a lot of lawmakers in Massachusetts or even the Secretary of State, but luckily we can all agree on this, that vote by mail really is a secure and safe process. Numerous states across the country have even stronger vote by mail systems where everybody automatically receives a ballot. In Colorado, for example, and in those states, you see millions upon millions of people automatically receive a ballot and only dozens of suspected fraudulent cases. And those are only suspected, those aren't confirmed. So, I mean, this process proves incredibly secure, and, we're aware of it, it's there, but it's something that really should not be blown out of proportion because it's a tool used to disenfranchise voters, and we really want everybody to express their voice this fall.
Let me also add to that specifically to know that your ballot has been delivered, if you look at the application you get, there is a barcode. It's individual to your name. There's a barcode on that application. If you go to the Secretary of State's website, there's a location where you can enter your name and address and actually track the process of your ballot through the system. So you can see that it's been received at your election official's office.
Thank you, Nancy.
There is a website, Track My Ballot, on the Secretary's site where you can follow some of this information online.
So we can continue to put your questions in the chat. We'll have some more time for Q&A at the end, but I think we should move on to next steps and voter education. And so with that, I pass it off to Beth Wong.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everyone. Hi, this is Beth Wong with the Massachusetts Voter Table. And we really want to make sure that everyone gets their ballot application. Everyone is able to mark off that they want to vote in both the primary and the general election, and then successfully get their ballot in the mail and then be able to vote by mail. So we've seen in places across this country that there's polling place consolidation, that people who request applications request ballots don't wind up getting their ballots on time. We want to really get in front of this process by launching a big public education campaign, and we're going to need everyone on this call to reach out to people across this Commonwealth. We know that young voters, that limited English proficiency voters, voters of color, renters, and more are going to struggle to access this election more than most, and we want to make sure that these safe elections are available to everyone. So I'm going to turn it over to our fantastic Tisch Summer Fellow, Julia, to share more about our upcoming phone bank. Oh, and I need to unmute Julia, sorry.
All right, thanks, Beth. Hi, everybody. My name is Julia. We at the Voter Table are running a lot of phone banks to do exactly what Beth was saying, to reach out to all of the people who we possibly can and make sure that they are able to ask any questions about this super complicated voting process. So we have phone banks every single week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesday is from 11 to 1, Wednesday and Thursday are from 5 to 7. So we have different options for folks to get involved. And there are 3 ways that we would like you to get involved with these phone banks. First, we would love for you to come yourself to participate in a phone bank, get the hang of it, reach out to as many voters as you can. Second, we would love for you to send your members from your organizations to also volunteer with us in our phone banks. And then third, we have Train the Trainer webinars to help you all learn how to successfully lead your own phone banks. And we would love for any or all of you to come and get trained on our phone banks, on our phone bank leadership process. That way, eventually you will be able to to have your own phone banks and reach people in your networks as well. So Beth just put the link in the chat for where to sign up for our phone banks that are about vote by mail, and we also include the census in that as well.
Great, thanks, Julia. And in addition to those phone banks, which are our best way of reaching people one-on-one, usually door knocking is the best way to reach people and move people to action. But considering that we are living in these pandemic times, calling is our next best option. And we also are running a big texting program. In addition to calling and texting, we also are running a digital organizing program, which is going to include social media, the launch of the Safe Elections Network website with Common Cause, and also a video campaign. So we want as many people to post photos and videos of themselves smiling with your official 2020 vote by mail ballot application and post it on social media. We also are going to be editing quick 30-second videos in different languages for people to share. Yes, everyone can take their little selfie with their ballot application. So we'd love to work with you to make sure that we're spreading the word on social media. And then finally, as Julia mentioned earlier, we really are looking to maximize our impact by spreading the word to any lists of members, activists, leaders, and more. So we are super interested in working with everyone on this call to make sure that we launch the biggest possible public education campaign about safe elections.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth and Julia. So, one, I just want to flag again to message in the chat if you're interested in also talking about the training and recruitment program for student poll workers. But now I think I'm going to pass it off to Pam to talk about another way that we need folks involved, which is election protection.
So election protection is actually a very broad rubric. So the kind of voter education we're doing and outreach to election officials is part of election protection. There has been an ongoing effort nationwide as well as here in Massachusetts for since about, I think it started in 2002. I've been involved in every election since 2004. The sort of centerpiece, though, is actual work during the election period itself, either early voting or on election day. The 1-866 Our Vote hotline is the key kind of tool in that box, and that's a number that anyone can call and get legal volunteers to answer their questions. And those questions can be everything from where do I vote? I didn't receive my ballot, what do I do? To very complicated ones like, well, not complicated, but ones that might include litigation, such that there was a poll worker at my location telling people that they were not on the list when I was on the list, or that I had to vote for a certain ballot question, or they wouldn't give me a ballot. These kinds of things have happened in Massachusetts before. We've also had True the Vote come and tell people that they needed to provide IDs when they did not need to provide IDs. We have a great link with election officials. I know we have a lot of tension right now with the Secretary of State, but generally they have been good at responding to our concerns with local communities and sort of enforcing that. So what we'll be doing is a couple of things. In addition to the public education piece, there'll be a social media monitoring aspect where during the early voting period and during elections, where we'll look at social media, and there's a training for this, so you can volunteer to monitor to see if people are having problems or there's disinformation and Democrats vote on Wednesday or, you know, whatever else helps. And then we'll also have legal volunteers on the hotline, and then roving poll monitors, people who will mostly be in their car because of social distancing issues, and to monitor and see things going, like, are the polls open? What kind of lines do we have? There may be some opportunities to talk to voters in a socially distanced way, but it's important that we stay safe in the middle of a pandemic. We don't know what things are going to look like in November. It's certainly possible that everything will be great, but I think we need to do some small, at least we need to do some of this in November as well. So there is actually a nationwide sign up that anyone can sign up, and it goes to your state. We don't want and haven't been recruiting people for out-of-state work. There are some groups that do that. The Election Protection Coalition is a coalition of about 200 organizations, so it is very, very broad. And so I'll put in the chat the general link to sign up. But one flag, as I told our coalition before, it's protectthevote.net. And if you put protectthevote.com for the first time, the Republicans bought that URL and are using it for an anti-voter campaign where they'll be challenging voters. So make sure you sign up for the right one. So there's a lot to do, and thank you all for thinking about volunteering.
All right, thanks, Pam. So I think super quickly before we go into Q&A, I just want to recap. You know, one of the kind of top line takeaways is that everyone can now, all eligible voters can now cast a ballot in the mail in Massachusetts for these elections. I think a lot of the thrust of the current public education campaign is trying to encourage people to request their ballot as early as possible and also to send it in as early as possible. You know, that's in order to keep themselves and their community safe and poll workers safe, but also to help ensure that our elections, which are going to look really different this year, are also as administratively feasible as possible, and to really keep elections officials from being overwhelmed. The other thing I'll add, we want to strengthen this network. So we're hoping to have calls in the future. And I'd ask that you, in the chat, we'll go into Q&A, but if you would all also add one organization who is not in the chat or not on the Zoom right now, and who you think should be a part of the Safe Elections Network or looped into voter education and registration and GOTV in any way. So with that, I think we will open it up for Q&A again, and just doing it via the chat.
Dina, this is Janet. I just wanted to add that, you know, the pieces that you just went over, that you summarized, that we achieved in this bill, it's worth repeating. You know, thank you to every single person on this call and others in your groups that help, because, you know, Christina sort of went over the list, like, here's what's new, and we fought tooth and nail, as most of you know. So I just wanted to say, on behalf of the whole network, you know, congratulations to everyone for where we are today.
Thanks for that, Janet. And that's right. We've the legislation that was passed was with a number of sign-on letters that all of you were on, and a lot of help activating your memberships and working on social media, and a whole lot more. Let's see. Lisa asked a question about whether we're urging folks who do not need to vote in person to vote by mail. I think the answer to that is yes. I think that voting by mail is how we keep our communities safe. I don't think that we're necessarily like trying to, everyone should vote how they're most comfortable voting. But I do think that with the goal of keeping people safe, voting by mail is the best option and a really important option.
Just to build off that real quickly, some of us have been meeting with election departments, and for example, we met with, I spoke to one of the Cambridge election commissioners today, and she specifically suggested if you can vote by mail, because some polling places will be changed and they're just worried. So just to limit crowding on election day, they think it's just safest to vote by mail. So if it's possible, that's what some folks are saying.
So Kathy asked a question about people's whose mailing addresses are different than their residential address. There is a field for a mailing address in the voter registration file, and the bill specifies that things go to the mailing address, not to the residential address. So as long as that is in the record, it should be fine. You can update your voter registration information online at the Secretary of State's website. Maybe somebody could stick that in the chat as well. It's an online voter registration system. That is always something you can do if you are registered. And you want to make sure that everything's up to date as possible. So the Town Clerks Association is on board. I think they are concerned about the volume of vote by mail. I think it's worth noting that only 3 to 5% of Massachusetts residents have ever, well, in any particular election prior to 2020 have cast ballots by mail. So this is in the spring, some of the town elections had 30%, 60%. But that was a very small turnout election. As we go into this presidential, this is an unprecedented amount of work for our local officials. And there will be people, I can predict now, that will not get your ballots. You can vote in person if you don't get your ballot in time. But that's why we're pushing people to do it early. And trying to do as much as we can to protect the election system. This is not an efficient system. There are ways that, the code that was put on each of these things can be scanned instead of hand entered. That will help. But it's a lot of pressure, particularly in the general when we'll have 75%, 80% turnout.
Let's see, any other questions? Also, by way of follow-up, I'll send out to everyone I've already emailed and registrants the links that we're sharing in this chat, which includes the bill summary, how to join a phone bank, 866 Our Vote, and a little bit, a few others.
No, they will not be available. Nina had a question. They will not be available. They won't be tabulated until election day. They're just fed into the machines, and there's a separate button that you push to calculate the numbers. And that doesn't happen until the polls close.
There was also a question on whether there are supplemental resources going to support town clerks, whether as part of the CARES funding or something else. I don't know the answer to that question, actually.
So the Secretary of State has $40 million left over from 2002. We have more money for the Help America Vote Act than any other state in the nation, and we are far from the largest. That money can be used for purchasing equipment for elections, of which our officials will need a lot. There has not been an appropriation for cities and towns, but under the unfunded mandate law, that is done after the fact. So they'll have to spend, well, that's a general principle, but After the fact, they probably will be, they will have to, the auditor usually sends out a survey, they make recommendations, and then money gets appropriated that way. The secretary will probably have some kind of fund to apply for, but that has not been clear either. So I'm confident funds will be available. How much and how that will work is not clear yet.
Yeah, and also to the point of how we're working to support small towns and cities. I know that we've already, and especially some of the folks who are thinking about the poll worker question, have already reached out to town clerks in the state. I know I've had quite a few conversations in the past week. I don't necessarily have the perfect answer for how we help, but one of the ways we're hoping to help is by getting information out about how to become a poll worker, and make sure that folks know that's an option available to them. And there is also,
so just the 40 million question, why can't we use that money? The HAVA money is restricted to equipment, training, and data systems. So the secretary could use that for the online portal, but he cannot use it for staffing for local communities to, help them process all these mail ballots. We think there will be additional CARES round 3 or money coming, but that remains to be seen.
Yep.
There was a question about exactly how this worked. What's the next step? What happens is you get your application, you send it in, and it's already addressed. The cards that are going in are already addressed to your particular town clerk. You send the application to your local election officials. They send you back a ballot. You fill out the ballot, and then you mail the ballot back to your local election officials, or put it in a drop box at the town, or take it physically to the election office. So that's how that, and both the application and the ballot are postage paid.
Yeah, thanks, Dancy. I know the postage paid was very helpful for me because I don't know the last time I have had stamps on hand. Let's see, there's a question from Phyllis. If we signed up in the spring for mail-in ballots the rest of this year, should we expect an application in the mail? I think the answer is no, that if you've already requested to get an absentee, someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, that you just get your mail ballot that you've already requested. Yep.
I don't know whether you would get double. I mean, my suspicion is that you would get double, but I don't know. That depends on how sophisticated his data systems are, for this mailing.
Yep. Well, I think that if there aren't more questions, then I'll ask again to please add any additional groups who you think should be involved in this effort, or if you found out about this webinar a different way than an email from me or someone from the EMC, and you want to be involved, let us know. And then I'm also going to launch a poll with 2 questions on how you want to be involved, and also just if this was helpful. Oh, but there's a question on whether early tabulation will be open to observers.
Yes, should be.
Great. And yep, I know we all on voter registration recognized in the spring that voter registration efforts that happen in person that are so critical, and even visits to the RMV or health agencies where people automatically register are just not happening. And so that's why I really think that these phone banks and the social media campaign and getting as much information out on reminding people to register to vote early and making sure that folks know their safe voting options is all the more important. All right, so the poll I think should be up. I actually can't tell if it's working though.
Yep.
Yep.
See people voting.
Nice. All right. So I think with that, as people fill out the polls, we are wrapping up. Again, thank you all so much for joining this evening. I'm sorry about the Zoom bombing. That's the first time that I've been like not a participant in a thing that's gotten Zoom bombed, and I know I got really flustered. But it's great to have you all here and to work with you on voter education and registration and election protection going into the fall.